Hello everyone, I am Jonathan Little, and today we're going to be going through a $1,000 buy-in progressive knockout tournament that I took second place in recently. There was a big tournament series going on, so I decided to hop in. This tournament had 279 people, I believe, and we came in second. So that was a lot of fun. This is, like I said, a progressive knockout tournament, so there are sometimes payout implications. This is not really a full series on progressive knockout tournaments, though, because the replay does not actually tell you what the knockouts are. I will give you a spreadsheet, though, that is very intuitive. Basically, just enter the buy-in, enter the starting chips, and then it tells you, if you can collect the bounty, how much that bounty is worth in the form of chips. You just add that to the pot. That'll affect your pot odds a little bit. Usually you're going to be adding between like 2 and 10 big blinds to the pot, depending on the bounty, and that's it. So you may find some of these hands, if I get deeper stacked, I'm going to play a little bit more aggressively when I can collect the bounty. Maybe I'm going to call off a little bit more or shove a little bit more when I can collect the bounty, but it really shouldn't affect play like all that much. It will affect play a little bit, but not all that much. Also, if you're going to play progressive knockout tournaments, you want to buy in on time, because as people bust, well, that money gets removed from the prize pool. And also when you buy in, you can't collect the bounties. Like right here, notice I clearly bought in late. I have 25 big blinds. I was in Nottingham playing a party poker series, and I busted, and I came home and just registered everything I could. So this is definitely not the most plus EV thing to do, especially in progressive knockout tournaments. In regular tournaments, it doesn't matter so much. I personally like to start from the beginning against soft opponents, but like I said, this is a $1,000 buy-in tournament, so it's not like these players are super soft or anything. So anyway, for progressive knockout tournaments, buy-in on time, it's very important. You lose a decent amount of equity by not doing it, but I wanted to play some online poker for all of you, so I hopped in anyway. So I'm going to be going through all the hands and just showing you what we're playing and what we're not playing. And that's basically it. So King 9 suited, we could open. We don't have to. I think it's certainly viable either way. We get jammed on and we have to fold. It is worth mentioning as well in the progressive knockout tournaments that we will want to open a little bit tighter because the big stacked opponents are incentivized to play with us, right? That said, I do think it's still fine to open with hands with the intention of folding if you get jammed on. All right, facing a min raise, I'm definitely going to defend King 10 offsuit. I defend pretty wide in the big blind when facing a min raise, just because we're getting very, very good pot odds. Obviously, we can't collect the bounty or anything here, but this is a fine spot to call and just try to flop well. It's pretty nice. I check, and then the opponent overpots it. So he's basically putting me all in, right? So now the question is this hand good enough to get it in with? And the answer is definitely yes. In this scenario, I'm definitely going to get it in with any king or any jack. Would I get it in with an 8? Probably. I wouldn't love it with an 8, but I do think it's probably okay to get it in. When your opponent blasts it like this, usually they're going to have either a one pair type hand that's kind of vulnerable but probably best, like, well, King 10, or they're going to have a hand like a draw, like 10-9 or Queen 10, I think a lot. Maybe a hand like Ace 10 of clubs, hearts, or spades, maybe. Stuff like that. I think that's what we're going to be against. So in this scenario, like a pair of 8s is kind of marginal, but I think a king or a jack is definitely good enough to get it in. So do not be afraid and be happy to put your money in. We do get it in, and he has ace queen for kind of an optimistic jam. I think he's probably better off just betting small and then folding if he gets jammed on, but it's actually not that bad to get it in here when you can collect a bounty, because if I am just getting in with the jack, for example, notice he has lots of outs, so it's only really bad when I have exactly a king, and even then it's not like the worst thing ever. All right, so King 6 offsuit on the button. This is definitely a spot where you can raise if you feel inclined. I do not think it's mandatory playing 20-ish big blinds deep against the big blind. I think it's fine to fold. I typically play a little bit tighter than my opponents do, I think, from the late positions. I think a lot of people just get a little bit too out of line, especially online, especially against 20 big blind stacks, because they're going to jam on you a decent amount, and clearly you don't want to get jammed on. So I like folding in that spot, but raising's fine too. If you min raise, it's perfectly viable. And notice here it went raise jam, right? It's how people operate. All right, facing a raise with pocket 2s, I think flatting here is fine, but notice if I do flat call here, I'm really setting up a squeeze from either of these players. And if they jam and then if I jam the initial raiser calls it off, clearly I have to fold then, and then I just don't get to see the flop. So this is a spot where it's very important to look ahead and ask yourself what is likely to happen. And in this scenario, what is likely to happen is I'm likely to get jammed on. As we see, we do get jammed on, right? And this guy calls, that means I would have had to fold no, which would have lost 10,000 chips. And that's not good. You'd rather not lose 10,000 chips. You will notice I'm using a min raise or a 2.3 big blind raise as I get deeper stacked. And that's just what I'm doing across the board. I'm sure there are times where I may want to raise a little bit smaller than 2.3, maybe a little bit bigger. If I'm playing deep stacked, I'm raising to 3 big blinds, by the way. But I don't think you're really going to be deep stacked in the medium or in the middle stages of a tournament much at all online. But in the early stages, I will 3x it. But when we're playing about 30 to 40 big blinds deep, 2 or 2.3 big blinds is fine. So I do raise ace 10 of hearts, and I'm just going to make a small continuation bet very frequently on most uncoordinated boards. And I expect to get called here a lot. Then I get raised. And this is an interesting one because notice here, he can collect my bounty, but I can't collect his, right? So he's actually kind of incentivized to generally just be aggressive and apply pressure. Whenever you do have the chip lead over your opponent in a bounty tournament, it's just usually fine to be kind of aggressive because when you have the nuts, you just get to get it in more often. And when you have a bluff, well, they fold sometimes. And when they get it in, whatever, right? You fold anyway. So this is a tough one because you don't know if he's raising just to try to get me to put all my money in because he has a nut hand, or if he's raising to try to get me to fold, right? So this hand, I think, is, from a GTO point of view, is definitely good enough to call. We could even consider jamming. If I do call the flop, I'm going to call again on all heart turns and then even some non-heart turns. Like if it's a low card, I'm probably supposed to stick around. So it gets kind of nasty here. So given I don't think I'm going to get raised on this board all that often, I actually think folding is viable. Like if you think you're going to get raised here frequently, meaning your opponent's going to raise with a lot of bluffs and a lot of nut hands, then you just can't fold. But if you think your opponent's rarely going to raise, then it becomes a little bit better to fold if they're just going to have nut hands, right? Notice here, this guy's stats are actually pretty active. Like 31/21 is pretty active. So his VPIP pre-flop raise up here. Steal percentage, 3-bet, fold to 3-bet. 3-bet's pretty high. These numbers on the bottom don't matter. We don't have enough of a sample. But this is pretty active stats. You see, if you look around the table, it's actually one of the more active players. The only person who's more active is C. Darwin, and this guy's actually one of like the top 10 players in the world, so, go figure. So these are pretty loose stats. So looking at this, I think I'm probably supposed to call or jam, but I folded. I probably didn't have these stats. This was actually my first session of playing, I believe. So I didn't have any of these stats, unfortunately. But if I had those stats, I think I'm probably supposed to shove. And I know it may seem optimistic to shove there, but I think he's going to be raising me a lot. And if he's raising me a lot, then that was too tight of a fold. All right, facing a min raise from a 20 big blind stack, I will definitely call. And I like to just check rip it in here. This is a good example of a spot where if I was shallower, if there was no bounty in play, I would probably check call. But with a bounty in play, notice I can collect his bounty. I don't know what it is, right? But it's probably worth somewhere between 3 and 10 big blinds. If we get it all in and you put an extra 10 big blinds in the pot, it becomes marginal to get it in this spot. And I think that's going to be pretty nice. Also, we get protection against all sorts of overcard type hands. So I like the shove. And we are going to get called by a jack every time, clearly. But that's okay. We get there. And, actually, we were ahead, right? And this actually shows you the power of getting it in these spots because we were slightly ahead to collect the bounty and to win the guy's chips. So that's nice. Didn't even have to get there. 9-4 offsuit in the small blind. I think it's fine to fold even against a player who we cover. 9-4 is terrible. Limping's fine, though. Don't get me wrong. If your opponent's going to be incentivized to be tight for whatever reason, like say you're on some sort of payout bubble, or if you can bust them in a spot, or if they just think you're crazy, or whatever, that's a spot where you can definitely limp and see a cheap flop because you're getting good odds. Here is King 10 on the button. Both players call, which is a little bit of a bummer. I think we can bet or check small either one. It's fine. If I do face a bet, I'm just going to have to fold in the spot. But if we do check it down, I win a decent amount of the time. And this is 8-7. We do win, right? And this shows you that it's fine to check down. People will just check it down because they have to worry about you making calls in those scenarios. All right, here we have a raise and a call. I'm definitely going to be 3-betting in this scenario. If Well, so notice here I can very happily get it all in for this 20 big blind stack, right? Tens are great. Also, there's some bounty implication. Even without a bounty implication, though, I think it's fine to go ahead and re-raise. If the stacks were deeper, though, if everyone had my stack size, like 50 big blinds, I'd be way more inclined to call, because then I don't want to 3-bet to 140, have this guy make it 160 or 130 or something like that, and then it get back to me, because then I'd probably need to fold, but I definitely don't want to fold 10. So this is a good example of a scenario where when this guy's shallower, I can just very happily get it in against him. We do get jammed. We have an easy call now because we're getting great odds. And we had a flip, but we lost. That's okay. A lot of people get really upset when they lose flips or lose any all-in or they get unlucky or whatever. Realize you're going to lose some hands. That's what happens in poker. Every day I get emails saying, oh man, this game is hard. It's tough because I see even good players losing 5 hands in a row when they get it all in as a favorite. I'm like, yeah, happens. Do you know what you signed up for? All right, pocket threes. We can go either way between limping and or calling and jamming, but I typically lean towards call with this stack size. If I had more like 125k, I would have been all in against a min raise. It's a very bad flop for me, so we just fold. Something I've been studying from some of the best players in the world is like really wide defending ranges from the blinds against late position raisers. If you're in the big blind, you normally lose 100 big blinds per 100 hands because when you fold, right? So if the alternative is to call and then play post flop, if you lose less than 100 big blinds per 100 hands, you actually are profiting, right? And it turns out over this session in like the tough games that I played, I mean, I think the lowest buy-in I played all week was like a $100 game, and I played a lot of 1Ks and 2Ks. I was like minus 75 big blinds per 100 defending with the like bottom 20% of hands. So when I defend the bottom 20% of hands, I'm actually more profitable than folding them against late position min raises when we're playing, 20 to, well, basically less than 30 big blinds deep. I realize we're a little bit deeper. Actually, we're not anymore because we just lost the hand. Say we're a little bit deeper, but we're not. Anyway, what that is to say is that if you play well after the flop and you're not afraid to get in there and battle a little bit, defending from the big blind is pretty great. All right, C. Darwin opens. He has very loose stats. This seems like an easy all-in. If this player had tighter stats, and really looking around the table, no one really has tight stats. So I would probably jam this over anyone at the table. But if this player was playing like 10/8, which you will see some players in small stakes games playing, I would definitely just fold. So the opponent's tendencies are very, very important when determining your jamming ranges in those spots. So all those hands are just bad. Here we have a raise. 9-4 offsuit's pretty bad. Let's see if I play it. I do not. And I think I should probably play here. I will say that in the bounty events, when you're the shallower stack, you have to be a little bit less inclined to defend with the garbage, I think, because your opponent's kind of incentivized to do a whole lot of betting just to get you all in whenever they feel like it, and clearly you don't really want to be all in. Like with these with these bad hands, they usually make a medium hand, because when we call them 9-4, we usually make like middle pair, bad kicker, right? We do want our opponents to be doing a whole lot of checking, and when they can collect our bounty some portion of the time, they're just not incentivized to check very often. So I think in these events, you probably want to defend a little bit tighter, but like if I called there, I think it's actually perfectly reasonable with this 25 big blind stack. All right, facing early position raise with king, queen suited. We could shove, but I don't think we need to. I think calling's fine. This hand plays perfectly fine 3 ways. We get a bad flop, and I just fold. This may look a little bit tight given we have overcards and backdoor flush draw, but even if we get a king or a queen on the turn and our opponent keeps betting, it's not the greatest spot in the world because we could be dominated. And if we miss, we clearly just lose as well. Also, this happens sometimes, and you get raised, and you really don't want to get raised. Here we open ace-2 offsuit. They both call, which is kind of a bummer. If they checked to me here, I would have made a bet. And if I made a bet and the big blind jammed me, I would actually call it off, I think. Notice this guy's really tight stats, 16/3 over 31 hands. But, 31 hands doesn't really matter all that much. Here's the number of hands right here, by the way. 31. So when this guy leads us, of course, an easy fold, I think. But this is a scenario where I would have bet and called it off against the jam, most likely, even though it would have been a pretty rough spot. And the reason I'd call off is because we just have plenty of equity, right? If he has a 9, we have, well, let's count them. We have 3 aces that are good, and we have 4 5s that are good. So we have 7 solid outs against a 9, and that's basically the worst scenario. So worst case scenario, we win, what, about 30-ish% of the time? And then in the best case scenario, we could have something like 7-5, in which case we're in fine shape, right? So either we are slightly behind or we are way ahead. Here, if the player on the button was tight, I would consider opening it, but player on the button is not tight, so I'm not going to open it. All right, C. Darwin opens again. He's playing pretty loose, like I said. I think I like a jam. Calling's fine too, though. The hands that I am going to call in this scenario are going to be mostly the big suited cards, like Ace-Jack suited, Ace-10 suited, King-Jack suited, King-Queen suited, Queen-Jack suited, Jack-10 suited. Those are most of the flat call hands here. If I had something like pocket 8s, I'm probably still jamming. If I had Ace-Jack offsuit, I'm jamming. But the big suited hands especially flop very, very well. So I'm okay calling in this spot. All right, so facing a tiny continuation bet. This is a pretty nasty scenario because we clearly have the best hand a ton, but if I raise, he's probably going to be getting in mostly with hands that well, if he gets it in, we're fine. Don't get me wrong, we're fine. But I think raising is going to force him to play pretty well. I don't really want him to play well. So it's a nasty spot where I think calling's probably right, because if you think about it, the only card I'm worried about coming is an ace. And even then, I don't always lose on the ace. So this is a spot where I think I like calling against a small bet. I would definitely like calling more if it was heads up. When it's multi-way, I'm a little bit more inclined to raise. But I think it's still just fine. The board's so incredibly dry. This happens. He jams me. If C. Darwin got it all in, I would still just get it all in here. I am literally never folding at this point. I have the best hand virtually every time. And, sometimes you lose, but we're getting it in. And we can collect the bounty. Woo! That's not what we wanted to see run off. But we win anyway, so that's lucky. So I'm going to pause this video every 15 or 20 minutes or so that these parts don't get too long. We'll come back and continue reviewing this deep run.